Welcome to the fourth season of Faith and Sustainability, a podcast where we look deeper into how our faith traditions inspire us to care for our common home. I'm your host, Leonard Robinson.
And I'm your co-host, Kat Doyle. This podcast is made possible from the generous support of Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, St. Francis Services, and Semco Atlanta. Okay, so Leonard, we said last week that we were going to bring the guys from Christian Brothers back because we had way more we needed to learn about them. So we have them back again this week.
Yes, we have Jeff McCroy, the CEO of Christian Brothers Investment Services, and we have Tom Dignan. He's the co-chief investment officer for Christian Brothers Investment Services. And yeah, we're going to do part two because it's just so much good information that we had. So gentlemen, welcome back to the Faith and Sustainability Podcast.
Thanks for having us. This is great.
Great to be back.
Tell us a little bit about Christian Brothers' strategy for investment opportunities.
Especially how it relates to the document the Pope wrote, Laudato Si.
Yeah, Laudato Si, which translates into praise be to you, is about environmental and social justice. It's about a call to action. And when we're investing in how do we incorporate that, we do it not just through exclusion, but we lead with engagement. So oftentimes the most important thing that we can do, and we like to say, to change the world, you have to live in the world, is on the engagement front. So when we're incorporating that and we're determining what we need to focus on, where it really starts is we have something called the Charism Council. And that Charism Council is an external group, and it's theologians, religious and lay people, and that are some who've been involved in the writing of Mensura Bonum that really help guide us. And we like to make the analogy, think of like a giant oak tree. They're the roots of that tree. That's where the ideas and the kind of form. And then we also have an Impact and Justice Steering Committee that helps us really, after we've determined our roots and the direction we want to go. That steering committee helps direct what direction and what causes do we want to engage on. And then that committee works with our team. We have a full engagement team that are going at the company level. And right now we have close to 60 active engagements going on at the moment. So at any point in time, we're engaged with numerous companies, and it all is coming from Catholic social teaching. And I think that what you're going to see in the future is, if anything, we have an opportunity for expansion in that area. Right now, we're engaged with close to 30% of the companies in the S&P 500.
Wow.
So maybe I can take what Tom's comments were and add a practical perspective on it. So a handful of years ago in our Charisms Council, again, this is an external voice to us as management, we recognized that the ethical use of AI was becoming in question. We then, within the operating part of the company, which is where Tom mentioned our leadership gets involved in the Impact and Justice Steering Committee, recognized that we were going to dedicate resources to that subject. And so that was really a strategic decision around targeting that as a subject matter that we were going to be leading the effort for much of the church, to be totally candid. And then all of a sudden we have people in the group that are known as the experts on ethical use of AI. 3 years ago, we weren't working on this. Those three bodies came together and said, this is really important to the church. And today we are at the center of the table on that issue.
AI is obviously one of those socially interesting directions to go. But I want to back up a little bit. I want to talk, and this is what's on a lot of people's minds, I want to talk about the idea of fossil fuels. We get calls day in and day out about fossil fuels and divestment strategies. Can you tell us a little bit about where CBIS is on that particular issue?
So oftentimes when I'm asked this question, I remind folks of apartheid, because I think fossil fuels is today's version of apartheid. And if you think back into the early 80s, the church had two responses to apartheid. About half the church decided that they were going to divest. And you know what that did? That got attention to the issues. It got press. It really galvanized some of the world in a very, very good way. At the same time, there were organizations like CBIS. We filed over 1,000 corporate resolutions with ICCR, which is a group of other faith denominations, to point out management's responsibility to end apartheid. Fossil fuels today is the exact same dynamic. Half the church is, especially those that are universities are leading it. There are some really important voices leading the divestment effort, and we appreciate the attention that part of the world is getting for that strategy. CBIS, on the other hand, believes in a just transition, and we believe that we do need to work with those that have capital to pay for the transition. The transition is going to take resources and capital, and we're staying at the table and trying to help management see their responsibility to help fund that transition. So for those that have divested, thank you. You got attention. And for those of us that are staying at the table, pray for us. Make sure that you understand that a part of the church has to remain at that table, and CBIS is playing that role. And this is hard work. I mean, as you can imagine, many of these management companies don't want to hear from us, but we're going to stay there and we're going to continue to talk about their responsibility in the just transition, and both strategies should appreciate each other.
So it sounds like you're balancing making a statement with making an impact, and you're taking the impact route.
We very much are. Actually, we have one colleague that I love when he says this. He says, do you want to make a statement or do you want to make a change? And we're about trying to help facilitate change. So we are at the table. We're not just trying to, tilt the windmills here. We are really trying to work with management to making sure that they understand their responsibility and they involve their companies in an ethical way.
So can you give us some kind of an example of how staying at the table has helped bring about a change?
I'll share one example on that. So I won't, on this one, unlike Target, I won't say the corporation's name because they're aggressive from time to time in a legal fashion. But we recognize that there's a fossil fuel organization that had retired wells that we didn't think those wells were being taken care of properly. And they weren't capping those wells in our mind in a way that was properly caring for creation, nor were they accounting for it in a way that we saw them recognizing the risk of those wells. So we went to them and we essentially put a shareholder resolution on the table that said, we think that you should be more overt in communicating the risk of those wells and the costs that if you're forced to cap those properly, what it would cost you to cap those properly. And that got a lot of shareholder attention. And so management began to, it was clear, think about their responsibility on that part of the discussion around fossil fuels in a very different way. So I would say that was a success in many ways because it was clear it impacted management.
What criteria would it take for Christian Brothers to divest, from a company or a sector?
Well, if we're invested in a company and we're engaged with that company, the divestment is kind of the last resort. When we're invested with the company, think of it as though, think of it from a traditional investment perspective. You have an investment thesis. That's your rationale for why you want to invest in the company. And then you have signposts that you expect to meet, and you want to see if they're meeting those signposts. So, to make a long story short, divestment would be when the company is non-responsive. We feel like our voice is not being heard. And, we don't want to be just up there screaming on a mountaintop, but not making any change. If we feel like we cannot make a change through engagement, then we will consider divestment. But we will fight the fight pretty hard before we get to that point.
A couple other criteria that I'd point to. One is that we have divested from certain activities just full stop. Those that burn a lot of coal, we're 100% out. Those that do fracking and mining in a way that we think is really bad for the care for creation, we're 100% out. The other thing that Tom was touching on that I think is really important is if we don't see a dedicated effort from management to be part of the solution, we will also divest. So it is about choosing management teams that we think can have a long-term impact to the positive.
So I want to jump in and ask, maybe tilt this question a little, and that is, so we're talking about fossil fuels. And right now, when we talk about fossil fuels, we are pretty predominantly leaning into energy. But those fossil fuel companies, as energy is changing and we're looking at clean sources of energy, a lot of those fossil fuel companies are now moving into plastics production, using the petroleum and all that for plastics. Is Christian Brothers at the table and starting to talk about this trend towards the plastics industry and how that's affecting the environment?
Boy, isn't this a huge concern for all of us? I mean, plastics. This could be a life-changing event for all of us if we're not careful. I would say, it's a small thing. When I came to the firm 8 years ago, we kind of all pinky swore that we would stop using straws. So, I mean, where you're heading towards is we don't only have a supply issue as a society, we have a demand issue. And so we have to recognize that we have a role in this as well. So I think your question was in some ways talking about it from a supply point of view, and we are having conversations about their participation in the supply side. But as a society, we really have to recognize that the demand issue has to be addressed as well. 2 days ago, I'm in a grocery store, and my sons will tell you this has made my head pop off for more than 20 years. A woman is buying a bag of the Cuties, which comes in it comes in a bag. They pick up the bag of Cuties and they put it in a plastic bag, another bag. There is no benefit from the second bag. You could just as easily carried the first. We as a society have to recognize that, and it's candidly far more a U.S. problem than it is a European problem. But we have to recognize that it is, in some ways, this is a demand issue.
It's great to hear you say that, because our Pope talks about the materialistic world that we're living in and the fact that we're going to have to change some of our behaviors. And it's great to see that Christian Brothers is, while they're addressing it from the supply side, are aware of that demand side and what it means as Catholics to change some of our behavior. So thanks for sharing that. I guess the other part of this is, as we're talking about things, is kind of what's coming down the pike. What other investment areas do you think we're going to have to start really taking a look at from a Catholic and ethical point of view?
Yeah, so I think when you look at it, and right now we are doing impact investing, and it's predominantly through our bond portfolio, where we will be involved in these impact bonds. So investing in things that do make a difference for cleaner water, areas that make the world a better place. But I think in terms of the future, I think you're going to see more impact investing and along the lines, impact investing that's consistent with Catholic social teaching in areas like some of the private markets. And right now, there's impact investing in private markets, but there isn't Catholic aligned portfolios in that area. And the reason is it's very difficult to do. You need a lot of scale. You need kind of negotiation power with the private market provider, whether it's private equity, private debt, real estate infrastructure. But to the extent you can, I think, as Catholic investors unite and deliver something, there is buying power and scale. And I think that's where, going forward, we as Catholics can really make a difference. And basically an asset class that has really not been available to investors that want to be aligned with Catholic social teaching. So that'll be a really interesting development as we go forward.
I'm not sure that everybody always understands the call that we're getting as Catholics to be mindful of the treasure that we've been given. I oftentimes tell a story of Tom and I walking on the beach. And we both have a bottle of plastic water, and that we both decide at that moment that we're not going to take that bottle of plastic and throw it in the ocean. And as we talked about in last week's segment, we talked about Mensurum Bonum, That's essentially exclusion. That is a moral choice to decide to avoid bad behavior. And it's morally correct, but that is not what we're solely called to do. And unfortunately, many Catholics think that exclusion is the end of our calling, and it's just the beginning. So then now Tom, in this story, Tom's going to come off looking pretty good, and I'm going to come off looking pretty bad. It's okay.
I like this story already, Jeff.
Yeah, it's okay. Tom decides that he's going to bend down and pick up a bottle. And he was just talking about impact. And impact investing is really where you're starting to now have an influence on the world. But you may not be influencing others. You may be influencing your own portfolio, or you may be influencing your own behaviors. And that is enhancement, according to Mensurum Bonum. Now, I make the mistake of taking my plastic bottle and throwing it into the ocean. And all of a sudden I feel Tom, you can't see this, but Tom's actually a pretty tall guy, and I'm a short guy. And he puts his hand down on my shoulder, kind of a little bit of aggressive. And he says, "Hey, Jeff, don't do that. All the bad stuff." And he starts telling me all the bad stuff that's going to happen. Turtles are going to die, and that the plastic is going to break down, and all the things that we know that is going to happen. Tom is now having an influence on me. And that is engagement. And that is what the Pontiff, the Holy See, calls for. He is asking us specifically to act in the way that we influence the rest of the world. And so to Tom's point about coming together as a church and as a community and as a people, if we really want to come together, we have to engage. And so that second part of the calling, I don't think is always understood as clearly as I'd like it to be, and that Tom would like it to be.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because a lot of times we hear our Catholic brothers and sisters talk about something out there that they're going to boycott. We're not going to buy this, which is great because that's that demand, that's that thing. And one of the questions I find myself asking a lot of times is, that's great that you're not going to buy, but are you still investing through your portfolio in those particular companies or things that you're boycotting? So what would you say to the individual investors out there when they're looking at their portfolios and considering Catholic investing?
Well, first thing I would say is you do not need to compromise on performance to invest and be in alignment with Catholic social teaching. But before going to the individuals, I would go to the Catholic institutions themselves. Because whether it's, and it's very predominant at the university level or endowments, that there is this belief that they would compromise on performance, and they're hesitant to build a portfolio consistent with Catholic social teaching. But I do think, like, as we evolve, right now it'll be someday maybe we'll be marketing to the pews, because most people are kind of cafeteria Catholics. They go to church, but then they leave church and they're investing in maybe something that they just heard through the homily that you really don't want to be a part of promoting. So I think we all are at different steps on the journey, on the path, but I think it's a long journey and we're still early in it.
Kat, there's a part of it that I think is really positive what's taking place is to Tom's point. CBIS predominantly serves Catholic institutions. I had mentioned last week that we serve over 850 Catholic institutions around the world. I think we're in about 37 different countries. It really is a global business. But the reason I was saying that I'm really positive about where this can go is because there's a growing group of investment advisors that is recognizing the importance of giving advice to Catholic investors, especially wealthy and near wealthy people, about what it means to construct their portfolios. And we really see that as a real important initiative. And candidly, where CBIS is at, because of our ethos around education, is that we're trying to help educate those advisors as to these concepts of enhance, engage, and exclude. And we're really trying to make sure that they are then prepared to then give good advice to those individuals about where to go. And that movement is real, and it's growing, and it's positive.
I think more and more you're hearing from our individual Catholics about even the investments in their 401ks. Are there socially responsible options? So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. And again, still not enough time. We're going to probably have to have you come on again. But Jeff and Tom, thank you so much for coming on and explaining about Christian Brothers and what you do and Catholic responsible investing and strategies that you use. If somebody wanted to find out more about Christian Brothers, what is your website and what's contact information?
So the website is www.cbisonline.com.
Well, hey, again, thank you both for coming on the show and talking with us. And let's not make this the last time that, we have a discussion like this, over a glass of wine, cup of coffee, or the everyday dinners that was promised to me. So
donuts and
Exactly.
golf. Donuts and golf.
Awesome.
We'll do the
That's
donuts
awesome.
after Lent.
Okay. Well, stay connected with us on social media and share your journey with the hashtag Faith and Sustainability.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast so that you can hear more of this type of podcast. And we'll look forward to meeting you next time
At the intersection of faith and sustainability.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2025.